Confident, confident, confident. I can be confident, 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 confident. I can be confident at work.
Hello and welcome to the Confident at Work podcast. I'm your host and your confidence coach, Anna Manning. And today we're talking about that thing that so often plagues the people that I work with right before they go to share something, contribute, or give one of their ideas. And it's that little voice in their head that says to them, "You're going to sound stupid." Now, if you've ever heard that little voice or experienced this, you know what we're talking about. And honestly, I think this is one of the things that I coach on the most frequently. So when we're trying to be more confident at work, certain things can get in our way. And this is a major culprit. That little voice in our head that oh so pleasantly tells us you're going to sound stupid. And today we're going to explore what happens when that little voice shows up, how you change it, and what happens when you do change it. And it can be changed. A little while ago, I worked with a client who identified this perfectly. She told me at the beginning of our work together that was constantly in her head and it stopped her from contributing. It stopped her from speaking up. It stopped her from asking questions, from challenging. And when we were doing our wrap up session, when we'd finished coaching, we were talking about all of the ways that she's changed, that she's grown, and all of the difference that she sees because of that in her day to day. The original problem that she'd come to me with was that she wasn't able to contribute at the level she wanted because she was constantly hearing this voice in her head that said, "You're going to sound stupid." And I asked her about it and she just kind of waved her hand and said, "I just don't think about that anymore." And then she talked about something else. And I was like, that's the magic. That wave of the hand, it's just not a relevant issue anymore. It doesn't come to her mind. She doesn't hear it. It just is a non-issue. And that is what I would love for you. If this is a problem for you right now, I would love for you in the future one day to just give a wave of your hand and say, "Oh, it's just not an issue." For it to be just something that doesn't happen, that you just do not have to think about. Because this issue causes quite a few problems. Some of them are obvious and some of them aren't. So I want to talk about what happens when this issue arises. Seems like one tiny little thing, a sentence in your mind that says you're going to sound stupid, but it has quite far reaching consequences. Consequences before, during, and after those interactions, those meetings, those moments where that little sentence in your mind, "you're going to sound stupid," pops up. And it has a wider impact on your confidence. So, some things I see happening before meetings, if this is a thing that pops up in your head, is that people will tend to worry, get anxious about what's coming up, think about it quite a lot beforehand, and not necessarily in a helpful or proactive way. It's more like, what's this going to be like? I don't know what these people are going to be like. I don't know what topics are going to come up. I don't know how this is going to go. I don't know what's going to happen with these conversations, right? All of this kind of mental noise, mental drama that can make you feel worried and anxious. And then that can lead to either putting it off and not preparing at all and then trying to do something last minute, or the opposite, which is really over preparing, scripting, making loads of points, trying to kind of think about and cover every eventuality before you even get into that meeting. And both of those things can be problematic. Then during that meeting or that interaction, you might have an idea, you might have a opinion about something. There may be a moment where you actually disagree and you would like to challenge or offer an alternative position. It might be that something is confusing and actually you need to ask some questions. But right at that moment, that little voice pipes up in your head and says, "You're going to sound stupid." Let's pause there and slow down time for just a second. And if you're coaching with me, this is what I'm going to make you do. Take me to the last time that this happened. Give me a specific example. Pin me back into that moment and slow it down so we can really see blow by blow, moment by tiny moment, what was actually happening. And here's an example. We're in a meeting and we were having a discussion about this particular project. Conversation was ongoing, but I wasn't sure it was taking us in the direction we needed to go, and I wanted us to get back on track. I was about to open my mouth to speak when I heard the voice in my head saying, "You're going to sound stupid." When I heard that voice, I noticed it. I listened to it. I froze. I got in my head and I started thinking about the conversation and the point that I was going to make. I started thinking about how I should phrase it, how it was going to sound, how it was going to come across, what people were going to think about me, wondering, worrying. I felt tense in my body. I felt tight. And then I didn't say anything. And after that, I silently got annoyed and frustrated. And then somebody else said the thing that I was going to say, and it sounded perfectly fine. And everybody agreed that it was worthwhile and it got us back on track. Recognize that? That's a very specific example, but you can see what happened moment by moment for that person in that meeting. They have the thing that they want to say. They suddenly hear that voice in their head that says, "You're going to sound stupid." Everything stops and they go inside their own head, start focusing, thinking, wondering about what it is they're saying, about whether they're going to sound stupid, about their level of expertise, about what people are going to think. And then they get so lost in there that they don't make the contribution. And then they wind up feeling annoyed, frustrated, and they haven't contributed. And very often, it doesn't just end there. Very often, what people tell me is it stays with them afterwards. So for 3 or 4 hours afterwards, or maybe 30 minutes afterwards, they're kind of still in that meeting mentally in their head thinking, I could have said that. I should have said that. I didn't say that. And there might be an element as well as that rumination of kind of beating themselves up and thinking, oh, I really should contribute. Why can't I do this? I need to put myself forward. I need to be more confident. And the sum total of all of that from one tiny little sentence, "You're going to sound stupid," before, during, and after that meeting is that you end up wasting a lot of energy, a lot of time. You're not able to just get on with what you're trying to do afterwards. So that one little sentence can have a lot of negative impact and even wider than that. So if we pan out and look at that in the context of your career, let's say that's happening every week, every month, every year for a number of years. That has a detrimental impact on your overall confidence. And the negative spiral impact of that is that you are stuck in this low confidence cycle and it reduces your confidence further. Now, I don't mean to say this in a way that sounds like I want you to think it's your fault or I'm putting any kind of blame at your door. I do not. I would not. I'm never here to judge this. I'm just wanting you to understand and to hear what the impact is when all of this stuff is going on inside your head. And I'm guessing if this is you, you kind of already know the impact. You know that it maybe is frustrating, it's maybe annoying, it doesn't allow you to get your point across. Maybe you're thinking, actually, it doesn't even allow me to do my role in the best way because I need to make contributions. I need to challenge. I need to be able to share my ideas. It may be that if you're in a more senior role or this is a real expectation of your role, that it may be even that you're not meeting the expectations of other people in not doing that. But whatever the situation is, know that this can change. And when you do change it, when you no longer at the moment of an idea, when you no longer have that voice in your head that says you're going to sound stupid, what happens? Well, the same thing that happens in any conversation where that isn't present, because I know that there will be conversations for you where you don't think that at all. Whether that's a conversation with a colleague who you really trust, whether it's just with a friend, whether it's in your team meeting, identify a moment where you don't wonder whether you're going to sound stupid. You don't get in your head. You're just present in the room and you're just saying the things that you say as you're thinking them. And you'll know how you feel in those interactions. Probably more present, probably more relaxed, probably more at ease, probably more confident. And when you feel like that, you share your ideas, you make challenges, You ask questions if you don't get something, you disagree if you disagree. All of that is available to you when you are more relaxed, more engaged, more present, and generally feeling more confident. When you're feeling like that and you're no longer thinking, I'm going to sound stupid, you'll be able to trust your own expertise more. You'll be able to communicate with more clarity and more confidence, regardless of the setting that you're in. You'll be able to challenge appropriately when it's the right moment, and you'll be able to work more effectively and more decisively, saving yourself a lot of time and energy in the process. And having a greater impact, being able to actually demonstrate to people the knowledge that you have, the expertise that you hold when you're making contributions, when you're sharing, when you're challenging, even if you're disagreeing, you're using the full extent of your knowledge and your expertise and bringing that to bear in the work that you do. Now, I really don't want a tiny little sentence like, you're going to sound stupid, getting in the way of you doing all of that. If you know your stuff and you've got things to contribute, we want you contributing them. And guess what? Your workplace wants you doing that too. And I know that you want to be able to do it as well. So, how do you do it? How do you get to the place like my client got to, where with a dismissive wave of the hand, you just say, oh, I just don't think about it anymore? How do you get to a place where that little sentence that can cause so much havoc, you're going to sound stupid, just doesn't really pop up in your mind anymore? Well, for those of you who are long-term listeners to the podcast, you're not going to be surprised to hear me say this, but it's like everything we do. We go underneath and we look at those elements of a low confidence cycle, which might sneakily be underneath this issue of thinking you're going to sound stupid. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, go to the show notes and click in the confidence assessment. It's a free assessment and it will tell you whether or not you're in a low confidence cycle and help you identify some of these underlying habits and patterns that might be creating problems like this one. You're going to sound stupid. And the frequent flyers or the culprits that I often see when people are thinking this are self-doubt. And that might be doubting or just even forgetting your own experience, your own expertise, your own role, and what it is you're there to bring. An over focus on how you're being perceived. So, spending a lot of time worrying or wondering about how people are perceiving you will have you stuck in your head and wondering if you're going to sound stupid or other people think that you're going to sound stupid. Setting unrealistically high standards. So, expecting yourself to get everything perfect all the time. I should know everything. I should be perfect at everything. When that is your standard, it sounds good, doesn't it? But what it will do is create a scenario where you have to check that at all times. And one of the ways that you're going to check that is by your brain reminding you that you may sound stupid if you say this thing. And sounding stupid is to be avoided at all costs when your standard is sky high. So you think that that high standard is a good thing. And I agree with you that very often it is. But in this scenario, it's tripping you up. It's not allowing you the room to breathe and to think and to be able to ask questions and to share ideas that might not be fully formed or that might not be perfect or that might not be the greatest thing anyone said. Most of the things that come out of our mouth aren't those things. But when you're holding yourself to these probably invisible but incredibly high standards, one of the ways that your brain is going to police that for you is by checking whether things that you're going to say are going to sound stupid. So it's like you've installed a police officer to monitor your own standard, which is got to sound perfect, got to be excellent. And that police officer is the one who says, oh, might sound stupid if you say that. It's doing its job, kind of. It's enforcing the standard that you might have unknowingly created. And the last bit of that low confidence cycle that we see in this problem typically is a tendency to focus on the negatives and avoid or ignore the positives. So you don't notice that you said 10 things in that meeting that were useful and relevant, but you do notice the one thing that you might have tripped up over. When you see that kind of picture, that kind of skewed picture, you don't recognize those positives, but you really focus in on that negative. Again, you have to install that police officer to make sure There's nothing negative, not even if there's loads of positive. Because remember, you have to be perfect and you have to be worrying about how everybody else sees you and perceives you in order to think that you have any credibility, in order to have trust in yourself. And therefore, unknowingly, you have created this difficult environment inside your own mind within which you'll have to constantly question, am I going to sound stupid? And the good news is, once you can recognize those habits, those patterns that are part of that low confidence cycle, you can do something about changing them. So when you're able to, instead of focusing on how you're perceived, focus back more on what it is you're actually doing, you can relax more. When you're okay with occasionally having to ask a question or clarify or not getting something or not being perfect all the time, when that's actually okay, you'll be so much calmer. When you're able to notice all the things you do well as the thing that goes wrong, you can breathe so much more easily. And when you're more relaxed, when you're calmer, when you can breathe much more easily, guess what? You'll feel more confident and you will not have to have that police officer installed to second guess and check everything because it just won't be necessary anymore. You won't have to question all the time what you're saying. You won't have to question how you're saying it and whether you're being articulate or communicating it in the right way. You won't have to do so much overthinking. You won't have to get in your head. You can stay present. You can be where you are. You can ask the questions you want to ask. You can say the things you want to say. You can contribute. One last way that I love to think about it is this. Imagine if you had a boss who never really trusted in your expertise and always said to you, everybody is going to think you're stupid. You need to worry about this. You need to think about this. You need to tread very carefully. And who said to you, everything needs to be perfect. Don't get a foot wrong. Don't stumble. And who never really noticed the things that you'd done well, but lasered in and focused on the one thing that had gone wrong. Who said to you, oh, do you think you should say that? You're probably going to sound stupid. And then also beat you up for not contributing and for staying quiet. Who also got frustrated with you after that meeting because you didn't just say the thing. What kind of a boss is that? How confident would you feel expressing your ideas, sharing your opinions, and challenging if that boss was sitting next to you 24/7? I wouldn't feel very confident at all. I would be second guessing myself to high heaven. I probably wouldn't say anything. And I'm guessing nor would you. And I want you to understand that if that's the kind of boss you've got living inside your head, if that boss is constantly doubting your expertise and telling you you need to worry so much about how everyone's perceiving you, if its standards are really high and it will never tolerate a failure or a mistake, and it'll always zero in on the negatives and remind you that you're going to sound stupid, but then actually beat you up after the event because you didn't say anything, that boss has got you in such a spot. No wonder you get in your head. How could you not? Anyone who has all of that going on is unlikely to share their ideas, challenge, ask questions as freely as somebody who doesn't have that going on in their head. And if you still manage to make contributions, suggestions, and share your ideas when you have all this going on in your head, then well done you. You're a legend. But I know in the background that it is taking your time and your energy and draining away things you could be doing with your day. So, I hope this has given you some insight and some understanding. If you haven't already, go and take the confidence assessment. It's free and it'll give you instant ideas for how you can start to grow your professional confidence. And if you hear that little voice in your head that says, you're going to sound stupid, I hope that you now know that you do not have to live with this forever. It is possible to start to change it. Might take a bit of work, it might take a bit of focus, but it's possible. And if you want to come and work with me, there are 2 ways that you can do that now. One is within the Confident at Work membership. This is for professional women who want to feel more confident at work. Or 2 is private coaching with me. That is individual, one-on-one, where we go through those challenges and address them. Everything is designed to help you feel more confident at work. And I will see you in next week's episode. Bye.
Confidence, confidence, confident. I can be confident, confidence.